Hi, I'm Simon Tomes from TestBuddy. TestBuddy is a tool to help testers capture testing notes and share engaging test reports. Start a free trial today. Welcome to today's episode of Conversations on Exploratory Testing. And today's chat is excellent. It's with Andrea Jensen. Andrea is a software quality engineer in the maritime industry and an instructor for RiskStorming Online. In today's conversation, we explore the benefits of Ensemble testing, along with some of the key things to make it a success. And we also discuss a tool to demystify that scary thing called risk. I'm very interested to hear about your experiences with exploratory testing via mob or ensemble testing.
It all started with an experiment for me because I'm working as a tester in a cross-functional agile team. And I mean, as a lot of people in the test community can relate themselves to it, we sometimes face the misconception that as a non-automation engineer, we're just pressing buttons. And I think a lot of people can relate to this, or that we are just testing with those marks. And I was a bit sick and tired of hearing this, and I wanted to change. And 2 years ago, I started with doing a testing behind the scenes, which gave the developers in my team the opportunity to spend some hours with me exclusively. And I was sharing everything I could do or they were interested about testing. I showed them my daily work, or if they were more interested in our test suites, or if they were more interested in how I do approach certain test methods, I was sharing with them. And this went quite well. And a lot of people out of my team just volunteered for spending the hour or 2 or 3 with me. And then there was a slight change, but then we did this testing behind the scenes and everything went slowly back to normal. And I was a bit frustrated, disappointed again. And yeah, as you may hear, there's kind of a COVID pandemic ongoing. So probably everyone who will see this video knows about it. And we went back working remotely last year in March. So it's now our 1-year anniversary of working from home.
I see, yeah.
And by that, everything went back a bit to normal. I was just the tester again. And I got a new tester in the team who was started in January. And then for March, we were working remotely. So I was searching for opportunities, what we could do while we are not working desk at desk next to each other. And I did some research. I got some nice conversations about pairing mob testing, mob programming, or ensemble programming and ensemble testing. So, and then I was like, well, give it a try, because it couldn't get worse. It's just an experiment. So, and I gave it a try, and the team, honestly, they didn't know what I'm planning to do. And I caught them by surprise. I just announced a meeting and said, hey, let's do something fun together. And I planned an exploratory mob testing session behind the scenes without knowing them. And today I'm still super grateful that they don't crash the session and that they kept up with me and were open to the experiment. So when we ran the first session, and we got quite some interesting topics covered while we were doing it. And the overall feedback after the session was quite good. So I just kept going. And yeah, now we do this more or less regularly. And it's quite interesting what can change, what the dynamics in the team are doing then after you have those mock testing sessions, and how people who are not participating got FOMO feelings, which I found super interesting.
Wow, that's amazing. That is so cool. And I love a number of things that you shared there. Like, first of all, that it sounds like you work with a brilliant team who are up for trying new stuff. And I think that has such a, it sounds quite simplistic, but I think finding teams that are like, hey, we're okay with experimentation. We're okay with trying new things out. So let's see what happens. Let's explore. Let's discover some things that are new and different. So that's great. Like, cool. You have that team that are up for it. And I think the framing of like, hey, this is going to be fun and we're going to try something different. Let's see what happens, and just going for it That's amazing. I love that. I love that you did that. And when you mention about like, yeah, people having FOMO, I mean, that's a good indicator that people are like, oh, I want to do some of that. Why aren't I doing that now? Like, it's my turn. I think that's a really good indicator that it's had a positive impact on the team. And it has, as part of running these sessions, did anything surprise you, or did anything come out of it, either with the actual process itself or discoveries that you found for the things that you were exploring together? Was there anything that surprised you and those that you're working with?
Yes, I mean, at least every single session I did so far, I learned something new. And that's also the great thing about doing something in a group. Either you call it mob or ensemble. There are two wordings out here, as you mentioned them in the introduction. So yes, and I mean, there's a cool source outside which I used when I got started. It's the Mob Programming Guidebook by Marit. Excuse me for the pronunciation of the surname, Puhariari. She wrote about mob programming initially. And I just adapted this to testing, because if we program, we can also test in a group. And I used this as a starting point. And she described that if you're participating in this group, you should either learn or contribute. If you don't do any of it, you may want to leave. And ideally, you do both. And in every single session, I have the feeling I learned an awful lot, but I also could contribute with my knowledge, with my testing skills, maybe with also my skills of moderating situations. So, and what impressed me the most was when I figured out how developers may think, and that they approach stuff totally different than I would do. And there were epiphany moments where they said, yeah, try this. And I'm like, why haven't I done this before? And now I'm just incorporating this into my testing routine. And I also realized that after a while, testers incorporate some of my habits into their testing routine, which is just great. And I'm just so surprised that it works so easily, because we didn't do this by purpose. We just grabbed from each other what the other person is doing. And I think that's also one of the core pillars of mob ensemble testing: learn from each other. So that's really cool.
That's amazing. That's really, really cool. And it's those, yeah, those lovely surprises of oh yeah, I just hadn't thought of it like that, and that diversity of a group and different styles of thinking and critical thinking. It's really powerful
Exactly.
stuff. And what do you think, other than, or as well as, the team's kind of, I would say, up for attitude, that they're like, hey, let's experiment, let's do this, let's give it a go. What other things do you think led to the success, or have led to the success of these sessions? Are there like some real key elements that just make it work?
So I don't know if those are the success pillars, but I have some key elements I use in my sessions. And I think for our setup, they were pretty good. I mean, it may vary from company to company, from team to team, but I have some rules, like I don't force someone to join the session. I just do it with volunteers, and they may or may not be from my team. So we have a product team. We are developing software for a particular product. But if someone from the support department or from the technical department who is related to our work but does not provide software elements, if they want to join, of course they are invited to come into. And that really helps, because they join voluntarily, so they dedicating themselves to the moment, to the session, and they are not forced to go, so they don't want to ruin the session. And the other thing is, if we have diverse backgrounds, diverse skills, we also have diverse mindsets and diverse angles of view. And that helped us in the sessions we had catch things none of us would caught alone. So it just combines the skills to kind of a super brain, So,
Yeah.
and that's really the interesting thing. Yeah, some people never participating, although they're working in my team, but that's okay. I mean, you can't force someone, and you can't make everyone every time happy. And I just do it with the people who want to do it, and hope that they just spread the word, and others getting those FOMO feelings, or getting interested, and then try it out another time.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's great. That concept of not pushing people to try something, and because that's that they may just be disinterested, or not really up for it, and that kind of reaching out beyond like a typical engineering team. I can imagine that's very powerful. And how for someone who is new to running an Ensemble testing session, what are some of the key roles or the key activities that happen during a Ensemble testing session?
Mm-hmm. All right. So for the one who want to go more into depth, I would recommend the Mob Guide programming book. For others, just in short, usually we have a driver or the hands, which is the person who's working with the keyboard and the mouse and doing the user interaction with the program, with the software, with the app, whatever you're testing. Then you have the navigator who gives the instructions, who's the brain. And that's the person who exclusively gives the instructions to the driver. So the driver does nothing on their own purpose. And the navigator don't touch the software, but has to explicitly and verbalize what you want to do to the driver. And then there are the people who are the audience, the spectators, and they can watch, they can give also their ideas and share their ideas with the navigator, but the last word is on the navigator. And then once the action is done or the timer is consumed, the roles rotate. And then someone else is the driver, someone else is the navigator, and everyone gets the chance to do everything. In a remote session, like we started in a remote situation, we haven't been in one room. We could not that easily start because we are not testing a web app. We have an on-prem installation.
Oh, I see.
So
Right.
at the moment, I'm always the driver, but I have a plan to give up my driver role with the help of some IT tech and share it with others, because I'm a bit sick and tired of not thinking on just clicking.
Yes, sure.
As we heard in the beginning, testers are not just clickers. So that's the setup which works for us quite well. But there are also possibilities using a terminal server where we can't have access to, or having a video system which allows taking over the control. So whatever works for you, you need to experiment. The remote situation is a bit different than the situation being all people in one room.
Yeah, and amazing that you've been able to rise to, I guess, the slightly more challenging constraint of doing this fully remote. I have like positive thoughts of a future where you are able to do this together in a room, and that sort of switch over of roles is very straightforward. So I'm looking forward to that on behalf of you and your team, to get to that point where, like, yes, we can do this in person finally.
Yes, hopefully we could do this one day again. I don't know how it will feel to everyone from the team if we are back in the office, if we can survive the office again. So yeah, let's see. But hopefully, yes.
Yeah, for sure. It is very much an unknown, isn't it, as to what office life will be like when we can go back to an office.
Yeah, gonna be interesting.
Yeah, that's for sure. And as part of an Ensemble testing session, how do you kind of make note of your discovery? So, like, say somebody finds a bug, like what happens at that stage?
Mm-hmm. So what I usually do in the beginning, I have a little checklist of stuff before we get started, just giving it some introductions. For newbies who are joining for the first time, I just give the role overview, how it works, or a reminder for everyone who has been participated last time, just to keep the memory fresh. And then I always ask if the participants are okay with recording. So, and up to now, no one had any issues, so we just record the session. So there's the recording if we find something odd, but we are not sure what we did exactly, so we can always play back the recording. Further, I still have my notepad with me and doing scribbles like this one.
Brilliant.
I'm old-fashioned. I still need pen and paper. And we tried also step recorders, running them during the session. So because the video may not cover every click. And then after the session is done, I usually write a little wrap up and hand it over then to either the product manager or the development team, whoever's in charge for this particular feature or module we have tested in the mob session, to give them some feedback, what went well, what was a bit troublesome, what issues we may found, so that we also ensure that what we found is getting correctly addressed and will end up in the software someday.
That's a great process. And that, I can imagine that being able to record it is kind of like, that you've got that backup in case, like, oh yeah, we need to check, like, what was the subtle thing that we did to recreate that particular problem that exposed, that we discovered that we couldn't quite recreate again, or something like that. And I love that. I love that you put together like a summary, like the way you described it is like a testing story to engage with stakeholders that can care about this information. I think you described it as like, here's things that went well, not so well, and that kind of opportunity to like what we might do next. That's really cool. And I think our stakeholders are busy enough and they've got lots of other things going on. So I feel as testing professionals, where we can start off with the headlines, the what we believe, or the group, the ensemble has believed is the important things. I think that goes a long way with resonating with the kind of the audience or the recipient of such a report or testing story.
Yes, and I mean, when we do an ensemble testing, I usually reserve 90 minutes. So we have a start, we have an end, and we at least have 60 minutes for real testing. And then who wants to watch a 60 minutes recording if you just need maybe 30 seconds for the key indicator, which is important to you now? But what I also had, I did try make it nice and easy and short in reading for one of the stakeholders, and I just sent it over the notes. And as you know, I do recordings every time because he sometimes also participates. He asked me, how can I have the recording? Because I want to know the reaction of the group.
Oh, wow. Yeah, of course.
We were testing a module and no one of us had really a clue how to use it because no one ever did it before. And then he wanted to check out their reactions and how we approached the program. And we were also a diverse group, and how the various people still struggled to find the particular button we were searching. So sometimes also the reactions of the team are super important to see how the software feels and looks in terms of usability and understanding of the real user, even though we are not the real user, but maybe we are coming closer to a real user than the person who developed it.
Yeah, that capture and reaction, that's fantastic. And I, the way you describe it is that group of people at that point in time are a proxy for the customer, as close as you're going to get at that point in time, wherever the application is in its development cycle. That is a fantastic proxy. It reminds me, I once worked at a place where we hired this external company to run some usability tests for some new changes that were going live on this website at the time. And we got to go to they had this like kind of really swanky, funky office where they would recruit like a person from the public. We would give them like, oh, we need this person with this tech ability and they might be in this demographic, that kind of thing. They go and find those people and invite them in, and they get rewarded for their time. And we all sat in another room with like a one-way screen, And it was a bit weird, but we're watching this person who's using the thing that we've been building, and the person who's running the usability session is completely neutral. They're part of that company, so there's hopefully no bias. We've just given them a script to run through, like, how would you find this thing, or if you wanted to do this, how would you do it? And this kind of user, as we're referring to them as, was like going around and trying to navigate. And I remember this one moment where there was a button that we thought when we built it was so clear and so obvious, and like we were literally screaming at this one-way screen going, the button's there, just press it, it's just there. And this person couldn't find it, and we were like, wow, like we've really hadn't considered, we had our own biases and group think as a bunch of engineers and product designers and business analysts. We just had completely missed that it may not be obvious to a whole other bunch of people. So just, the whole click the button, it's just there. I really remember it. We're all like, oh my goodness, it's just there. But it was,
painful was it for you?
Oh yeah, very
watching
painful.
Someone else doing it and don't finding the button.
Yeah,
I'm like,
yeah,
there, press there.
It totally was. It totally was. But I think that was a very, certainly in my career, a useful reflection point, being able to get that close to a customer without actually meeting them, which I always thought was a bit weird. They sort of came in and then they left, and you're like, see you later, but you never met them. I think if I was at that company again and we happened to hire another company to run that sort of thing, I'd try and suggest that we actually got to speak to these volunteers and actually kind of understand some of their frustrations and pains. But that was quite some time ago, so maybe back then it wasn't kind of the thing to have a direct conversation to those particular users at the time. But yeah, it was very entertaining at the time.
Yeah, I mean, I could imagine. I mean, we had once the same session where we tried desperately to get it working, and we just didn't manage how to do. And I was a driver, and I was just sitting there. I'm like, oh gosh, what a desperate session, because after 30 minutes, everyone was frustrated.
Yeah,
no
sure.
one really had a clue what to do, how to press. No one really wanted to continue any further. And then there was the one colleague, he was like, well, could we just check the help file? And he finally said it. I'm like, oh yes, thanks. And then we just found we need just to adjust a tiny setting, what we haven't been aware of, and then it worked.
I see, yeah.
That could be interesting. You never know what the end user will do with your software until they do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can imagine, because the whole, like the way you described allowing like 90 minutes for a session, and it's the 60-minute time is like where you go exploring. That feels like a good number. I feel like any more would be like quite a lot for people to kind of commit to, and it takes a lot of energy and focus, particularly also if like you've described, you're also taking notes as well. It can be quite full on. So I'm definitely a fan of short time boxes when running any type of exploratory testing session, because I feel like doing so, we capture a lot of information, and we reveal a lot of information in a very short amount of time. And I think if it goes any maybe further than 60 minutes, that's a lot to share with someone. And I think if someone's on the receiving end of all that information, it'd be like, oh, it's just too much. And they may miss certain things, or they may just be slightly overwhelmed. So I think we kind of owe it to whoever is on the receiving end of our discoveries to not overwhelm them with too much information, because they probably have a lot of other stuff going on as well.
Exactly. And I mean, who is willing to commit to 2 or 3 hours meeting at the moment? I mean, we're all facing Zoom fatigue, and I totally can say myself, I'm too, and I don't want to push people into those long amounts of time. I mean, 60 minutes might be a bit short if you have a more complicated software. If you don't just check some bug fixes together, 60 minutes would maybe do it. But I like to have the short introduction, getting everyone on the same page, giving them the opportunity to ask questions before. Then we have the 60-minute concentrated work. And then we still have enough time for a little wrap up, because I also like to do a feedback session later. Not a big one, but just like, hey, what went well? What would you like to do for the future? Whatever. And then that everyone maybe have a buffer of 5 minutes to grab another cup of coffee or tea, or having a bio break before they need to head into the next meeting, because rushing from one meeting into another within 10 seconds, no one likes to do. And I don't want to make the folks attending my sessions that they have this pressure. So I think that that's also what I owe them when they join me and help me out on the testing and share the testing work with me, that they also have a nice and good time. And yes, and I think also 60 minutes is a good time for, as you said, for capturing the key facts, but also make it digestible for the people who later get it on the table, for prioritizing, for deciding what do we want to change it or whatever.
That's great. Makes me think about the power of running the way you described it, like a mini retrospective, like that kind of tees up the next session. And it's like we can instantly learn about, reflect on what went well with the process. What do we want to explore next time round? Because it's then fresh in people's mind. They can kind of get that instant feedback. And I imagine, because there's many more people involved than just a solo exploratory testing session, that it isn't so easy to say, right, we'll do this again tomorrow. It might be like, wow, we've got other commitments. Whereas I think if you are running things solo, that concept of shorter time boxes, even if it's like a 30-minute session, if it's a solo session, it's very easy to then go, oh, you know what, I'll debrief with someone after this 30 minutes. We'll then work out what to explore next, and off I go again. It's very easy to do that if in solo. So I can imagine you're really trying to maximize that use of that group of people together at that moment in time. But without putting loads of pressure on, like, oh my goodness, we've got to do everything. So I really respect the way you've described the success of the sessions that you've run. I really respect that. It feels like it's been a real balance to not overwhelm people, to set it up that they can enjoy it and feel like they're contributing and participating, and not feel overwhelmed or bored, or that I shouldn't be here. So yeah, congrats. The way you described it sounds amazing.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I just try to make it nice. And I mean, we do always a refinement. So it was not, the initial session was not, or is not the same as the latest session, because I always ask for feedback and try to adapt also to the requirements of the folks. And I mean, sometimes we also run out of time, but then I'm just asking, I still cut them at the time, because some of the folks participating, they could go over for hours. And I mean, I would love to test for hours with them, but we also have other meetings, other stuff to do. So, but sometimes we just do a second follow-up meeting, and then the most of the people are rejoining. So I'm just asking, are you up for a follow-up? And then we just check out for the next week and continue from there. And sometimes there are some fixes in between, and we gather more information about a particular question, so we can test with more knowledge, more assumptions, more details. So that's also a good thing, because sometimes if you're doing exploratory testing, you have a lot of assumptions because you don't have all the questions answered. You don't have all the requirements, and you're making assumptions. And the breaks in between, you can check in with the stakeholder, with the business analyst, or with the developer, like, hey, tell me, what is the button about? We don't understand it. And then you can come back to the audience, to the group, and just share the knowledge. And then it's more purposeful, in my opinion.
That's brilliant. It makes me think about that power of, I think of the best teams I've worked with, and they have that ability to feel confident sharing their knowledge of the product or service that they're developing, and not like, hey, this is what it does, or this is what it's supposed to do, but through good testing, and typically using exploratory testing techniques where, everyone might be working on individual parts of a system, and yes, maybe a demo at the end of, say, a sprint may kind of bring it all together, but I still feel the knowledge or real learning opportunity is slightly missed just with a demo. I think it's when a team can go exploring, or a pair of people can go exploring together, and reveal useful information slowly over time, that kind of knowledge base of what's possible with that product and service just grows and grows. And then it's not, it tends to avoid like, oh, it's just the product owner who has the whole view of how this thing fits together, or it's the product manager or the business analyst that knows how this all fits together. Like, everyone on the team then gets the opportunity to understand how things all fit together, and the reason why things are being built, or the reason why things are doing what they do that may be different to, say, the requirements. That's what I really love about kind of some of the key outcomes of exploratory testing, is that leveling up of knowledge and that learning opportunity goes a long way.
Yes, but I totally agree to that, what you said, because that's also the point why I really love to do mock testing with various people. We do a demo and we record the demo, and maybe someone also watched the demo afterwards, also is watching the demo while we are doing it. But like, going through the software for an hour is a totally different story than just watching a 2-minute demo. And also, in terms of breaking down silos and sharing the development work or the testing work to people outside the core development team is so utterly important, because we have a support team who's not incorporated or not included in the development team. How should they know if they don't see the software, how it works? And it also helps to, I guess, to overcome department barriers.
Yes,
so
yeah.
Just incorporate everyone. And we did a session with people from all different departments, and there were the questions ahead, like, I don't know if I have the right skill set, I'm not a technical person, or I have never seen the software before, I never used the module before. And they have those barriers which make them resistant or reluctant to join. And I was like, well, that's totally okay. You not need to know the software. We just explore them together. And if you don't have any clue, that's fair. You can say you don't have any clue. Yeah. When I'm testing, I'm often approaching my developers and say, hey, I got the pull request from you, but I don't have any clue what to do. Can you help me?
Yeah.
Can you walk me through? And that's okay. That's okay not to know everything. And that's also the cool thing, I think, about mock testing, ensemble testing. That's why I love to do it, because we are sharing knowledge without having this educational nuance to it, because we just explore it in a team.
Yeah, it's a great way of framing it. That and highlighting that some people can feel like they need to have at least some base level or base education of a particular feature or set of products or service to be able to contribute. And I like the way you describe it, where people don't, and that diversity is a good thing, because that person can come with like a beginner's mindset. And if we've been building and developing this thing for so long, we might have just stopped seeing certain things that are, potentially risks, things that we just can't see it because we're so close to it. And for some other folks who are new to it can come along and go, oh, why is it doing that? And you're like, oh yeah, we've just thought that was fine. I love those moments. Yeah, that's really powerful, really powerful. And I think setting up the invitees in a way where it's okay that they don't have to like read up on this stuff, or they have to put in real effort to learn something first before joining. That's really powerful. Like that whole reducing the barrier to entry. I think that's it's great to hear when you run it that you give people that confidence. Like, don't worry about it. It's fine. Come along. That's brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to make it as accessible as possible, because, I mean, it's also the nice thing. I mean, when we as testers, we are maybe used to not knowing stuff and heading for the unknown unknowns as we do exploratory testing. And we may feel much more comfortable with it because it's part of our job. But I also, I hope at least that I give my peers the feeling that they not have to know all the answers if they're joining the sessions I'm running, because we can explore them together. That's totally okay.
Yeah, that's so true. And I'll be honest with you, I often forget that as testing professionals, we're just comfortable with not knowing stuff. And it's like we're like, yeah, we go and find out. We go and ask some questions. We'll run a session that's around a specific area to discover useful information about that particular thing. And within 40 minutes, even if it's a solo session, we're like, oh, okay, we've learned that about it. I've got a ton more questions. And yeah, I often forget that I think when you get to a certain stage in your career as a testing professional, it just comes very natural, and it's not scary. It can sometimes be frustrating when you kind of like, oh, I wish I did know that because I'd probably approach this in a different way. But hey ho, this is the situation. But yeah, I can imagine as you described it, for some people in an organization, that sense of unknowns that are just like, well, I don't know, and then feeling uncomfortable off the back of that. And I think, we can't just turn around and say, like, well, we can say, don't worry about it, but actually taking someone through that process, like an Ensemble testing session, where they then go, it was okay that I didn't know this stuff, because we're all learning this stuff together. And as a group, there's different levels of knowledge, and that's fine. There's different levels of experience, but that's cool. And going through that as a collective, as a group of people, for those that were nervous, I can imagine it really makes a difference, and they get it, and they get the whole, you don't need to worry about it, having gone through that 60-minute session.
Yeah, I mean, that's at least what I hope what my colleagues get. So, I mean, if I would be asked if I know how to build a vessel, I always would instantly run to my naval architects, because I didn't study it. I have no idea. So I'm asking the professional from in the field. So I think that's okay to ask for help with your colleagues, or ask your colleagues for help.
Absolutely. I'm also interested to hear about your experiences working with the RiskStorming Online community. So if I've understood correctly, you've recently joined as an instructor. So yeah, like I'd love to learn more about what is RiskStorming, what is the online version of RiskStorming, and how that is connected to the world of exploratory testing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's true. I just joined this month in March. I have a daily job, a full-time job, as a software quality engineer, but I'm doing this as a little mini side project. And it all started pretty funny, or by coincidence. I was just reading about RiskSphere, about the cards. I don't have them with me now, but if someone is interested, check out Ministry of Testing RiskSphere cards. You will find them. It's a set of cards where they use particular criteria about talking about test techniques, test heuristics, quality aspects, and all the stuff. And it's a gamification thing, but I think it's much more than a game. It's just your entry gate talking about risk and potential risk with your product, with your development, whatever. And yeah, the cards have been out for a while, but then last year in March 2020, almost everyone went remote and people started working from home. And we haven't been in office meetings. We couldn't meet up and play the cards anymore. So Baron and his team, they decided to do a RiskStorming Online. And it's an online tool. You can sign up. There's a free version. There's a paid version with a bit more of premium content. And there you can play the card game in an online scenario, which is super nice and which resonates to remote working. And yeah, I just read this and I was replying to a thread he wrote in the Ministry of Testing community, like, oh, that's cool, sounds awesome. And then we started the conversation. And then last year, November, I did a RiskStorming workshop, my first one, officially on the conference. And a bit later, the guys there approached me if I want to be a RiskStorming online instructor. And now here I am. That's quite interesting. And I really can't believe it's still a bit that I am now. So, and RiskStorming is a cool tool because you talk about risk, you talk about potential issues with your software in an accessible way, where the complete team can talk about them. So you can share your screen, you can talk about the most important quality aspects of your software, you can have it in a discussion. The idea is that you always can later vote for it. I think it's not implemented yet. And it's an accessible gateway to talk about risk and maybe creating a risk map or other risk strategy, whatever, which always sounds a bit scary if you're saying, oh, we need to talk about risk. And everyone like, yeah, I know, but I'm feeling not so comfortable with the wording, but having a nice app, having a game, using some cards is so much more accessible and getting people easily involved. So yeah.
That's amazing. And well, congratulations on becoming an instructor. And yeah, fantastic tool. And as you say, a great way to get people feeling comfortable about exploring risks. Because yeah, like totally agree. It's a scary word. And you're like, risks, like where do we start? Like, what does that really mean? And I feel when testers get comfortable discussing risks and what they mean in relation to the business or customers or users or stakeholders, I found that it really shifts how people then approach their exploratory testing and how they use those risks to guide what it is that they explore. And also, like as you say as well, like have conversations about like, well, where do we place our efforts? Because it's sometimes if we identify all sorts of different risks, you know, these are a whole list of things that are going to threaten the value of this product that we're building. Like, where do you start? And being able to have good conversations about where you could place your testing efforts based on those risks and ranking them, that's really powerful. Because I feel like particularly with certain exploratory testing techniques, like we won't have all the answers straight away. We won't be able to have enough useful information to make decisions about whether we can, say, go live with a certain feature, and using risks to guide us through sort of time box testing sessions, and then using that information that we discover to then put it next to the risks that we identified earlier and say, are these still risks now? Do we need to do anything about them because we have this extra information about that particular risk? Can we mitigate that risk by doing something else? And it allows us to sort of reveal more information to hold it up against those risks. And it may then change the priority of those risks and where we then place our effort. But yeah, a tool like RiskStorming Online, definitely worth checking out. It's really well built, very easily accessible, and great for getting a team talking about risks to help them make better decisions about where they place their testing efforts.
Yes, and I mean, I totally agree to what you said. It really helps because testing resources, also development resources, they are not unlimited. So we need to plan wise where we want to use them and where we want to consume them. And sometimes I realize that I have a risk-based testing initially when I start testing. I'm always thinking about what's the most important one, especially when I do exploratory testing, or as at the moment I'm in the middle of the regression test, so I'm decided to start with the most important tests. But I have this in my mind, but having this in the mind and knowing this as a team is a different thing. And RiskStorming helps you to have the conversation, and although you may not always rank it like at the same likelihood, you can explain why you think as a tester usability is so utterly important, while maybe the DevOps person would say, but security is much more important. And then you can start the discussion and the negotiation. And in the RiskStorming, there are 20 cards of quality aspects, but in the game, you are only allowed to pick 6. And what I realized when I did it for the first time was 2 managers of my company. I did it. And then we initially started the discussions. Yeah, I have 6, but I have 2 more, which are also very important. I'm like, well, you can't. Yeah, but I have 2 more and I want to place them. Like, yes, but our resources are limited. Please decide which is more important. And I think sometimes we as a development team tend to forget that our resources are limited, that we have to do the threshold, that we have to do cutting off at edges and say, okay, we may not go for perfect or all, we just go for good and working product. And we may go live with known bugs, but they are not the critical one. So we always need to balance our resources a bit. And RiskStorming could really help in the beginning to settle your mind for the product. Where are our key priorities? Over time, they may change, but then you run another RiskStorming session.
Yeah, that makes totally sense. And I think there's something very powerful about setting constraints, like the RiskStorming constraint. Like you can just pick 6, because it really forces someone to, and it's hard. And I can totally get that. There's the example you shared of like someone saying, yeah, but I've got 2 more, I've got 8. It's like, nope, the constraint is 6 and it's there for a reason. And I think that's a powerful way to develop software, is to establish some constraints and to stick with them. And if, of course, during retrospectives and looking back on your processes, that they are too restrictive or they don't help with decision making, then of course they can be adjusted. But I see constraints as just a powerful decision making tool to kind of help you just get on with stuff and not get caught in this kind of analysis paralysis that can sometimes happen within development teams, trying to solve too many problems at once, or trying to think of too many scenarios or too many things that can go wrong. While that can be useful because you can mitigate it, I feel good development teams sort of are able to move things forward and accept that there are risks that they can't address immediately, either they don't know enough about them, or they just, as you say, haven't got the resources or capacity to address them. And over time, creating like rapid feedback loops through various different exploratory testing techniques, kind of building up a picture, but not being afraid to move at a pace that's not too fast. It's just like, whatever to risks, just go for it, but not too like, we need to think about that some more, and let's come up with another 20 more things that could go wrong before we actually start exploring. So it's kind of, you use the term balance, and I really believe there is some balance to be had. And I feel setting constraints are a great way to help a team find that balance.
Yes, and I mean, if you're just thinking about addressing all the risk, all the problems, all the bugs, you would just end up like a rabbit in the spotlight in front of a car because you can't move. You're just so overwhelmed by all the stuff you want to do that you're at the end not able to act in any direction. So yeah.
Yeah. It's like I don't know, I was trying to think of a rabbit in the spotlight. It's like if you turn it down slightly and you find the right brightness that it's kind of can see where it wants to go, but it can go at a good pace because it's a rabbit. Maybe there's something there. I'll work on that one.
Okay, maybe I would call my team next week the rabbits. Okay.
Brilliant.
We go for that. I don't know if they will agree to that, but we'll see.
I guess you'll find out. That's great.
And if you want to know more how I survived ensemble testing with my team, or how grateful I am that I have such an experimental team who's willing to do the stuff with me, because I'm doing always crazy experiments with them and they are still coming into my meetings, just let me know. And Simon, thanks for having me. Thanks for giving me the opportunity. It was lovely to chat with you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a fantastic opportunity to learn from you today, and I'm super grateful. Super grateful for your time and the chat that we've had. Loads of really good stuff, and absolutely encourage people to, as you say, to give ensemble testing a go, and to encourage a team to experiment with what's possible, because there are some real benefits. And also, of course, check out RiskStorming Online. It's a fantastic tool.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks for watching. I'm grateful if you could like this video, or feel free to subscribe to this channel. And do let me know if you're interested in TestBuddy. It is a useful tool if you like to take notes during your testing sessions. We'll see you next time, and keep exploring.